So 1984, I remember I was a fan of the comic strip Bloom County back in those days, and the strip on I guess the last day of '83 or the first day of '84 had Penguin Opus and Milo, I think, sitting on a hill, and it was nighttime, I guess midnight, and Milo looks at Opus and says, "Shh, it's 1984," which at that time had a kind of a foreboding to it because of the much earlier book 1984 by George Orwell, which was written quite a few years before the 80s and sort of, I guess, arbitrarily picked the year 1984 as a time when governments would be very authoritarian and life would be pretty colorless and gray, which 1984 was anything but that in reality once it came around. It's funny that nowadays we are kind of in that with the internet and with government responses to terrorism and things like that, at least to some degree. But in 1984, it was still the booming 80s, and things were good and fun, and can confidently say with no hesitation, 1984, best year of my life. The early 80s, the late 70s were right up there with it. And when I was a little bitty kid back in the 60s, you know, with Santa Claus and bedtime stories and toys and all that, right up there with it too. But 84, by far the best year of my life. And, you know, if I could have any wish I wanted, I wouldn't even have to think about it. Just give me 1984 on an endless, constant loop. Wake up January 1st at 12:01 a.m. It's 1984. Go through the year. Go to sleep on midnight, December 31st of '84. Wake up the next day and it's January 1st, '84 again. I would be about the happiest person in the world if that happened. So I just want to talk about some of the memories and music, especially from that. And it's funny how music, at least for most of us here on the VC, I would think, is so integral and part of our DNA and tied into not just the enjoyment of the music we love, but in the events of our life and forms the soundtrack of our life. And there's so many songs that, not just 1984, but through life, that if I hear that song, play the record, or hear it on the radio, I'm just instantly transported back to whatever year, you know, 1979 in high school with Anytime I Hear I Want You to Want Me by Cheap Trick, because that was a huge album that year. Anytime I hear these songs, these albums I'm about to show from 84, it's just right back into there. It's just a great time to be alive. I was 20 years old. I turned 21 in September of that year. I had a girlfriend. We were very much in love. I was very much in love with her. I think she was very much in love with me. I don't know, looking back in retrospect, but we were talking about getting engaged, talking about getting married, talking about having a life together. As tragically, she's now married to another guy and has 4 kids and a perfect life, and I'm here. So that didn't work out. Never fell out of love with her, but that's a very long story. And it was kind of had run into her recently, and that's what sort of sparked back memories of 1984, one of the years that we were going out there. And also think, because I've said on here over and over, I'm like the grumpy old man that, you know, no good music since '84, '85. And I do think that 84, some stuff in '85, but I think '84, in my opinion, was the pinnacle year, or the penultimate year, or whatever, the final year of really quality, good music. And while there's been some stuff in the years, decades since then, I just, music has never really been as good since then, not to me anyway. There are some things I want, and one of these days I'm planning to do a video on songs or albums or bands post 1985 that I actually do like. There are a few, there aren't many. 98% of the stuff since then I have no interest in. but I'll do that sometime. But back to good old 1984. It's also funny to me. I've always thought that songs and how they recall events in your life, how they soundtrack your life, how they have meaning in your life, and how a song can have a million different meanings, more than a million different meanings. Take "I Want to Hold Your Hand," for example, by the Beatles. Paul and John wrote that song. I have no idea whether they wrote it about anyone specifically when they were doing that, or they just trying to come up with a catchy pop song to get, famous. Um, think they were probably Paul was probably thinking about some girl that he wanted to, cute girl he would like to hold her hand. John probably thinking the same. It's a universal feeling. I mean, they don't name a girl, so it can be applied to whatever girl you happen to have a crush on or be in love with or going out with. Holding Hands it's a sweet, innocent song, very upbeat, catchy rock and roll pop song, but it's one of the first things when you meet a girl and you have that attraction and you get past the talking to each other and you want to go out. Generally, that's the first thing that you do with each other, even before you kiss each other, certainly before you move on to other things if the relationship gets to that point. And even later in life, I mean, if you're married 30 years, still sitting there watching a movie or going for a walk, holding hands, and you've been married and have kids and grandkids and all that. So, ostensibly the song's about some guy wanting to hold some cute girl's hand, but once a song's out there, it takes on all kinds of meanings that may not have anything to do with what the song was specifically written about. For someone, that song came out, or they heard it for the first time, because you didn't necessarily hear it when it first came out. Some people weren't even born, but they heard that song and fell in love with it when they were in high school. And had a good time in high school, so now when they hear that song in the years after, it always reminds them of their high school days. Might be a sad thing. Someone might have discovered that song the week that their father or mother passed away, and so it's always going to remind them of losing their dad or their mom and be a sad thing. So it can have all sorts of meanings, not just "I Want to Hold Your Hand," but any song. For example, 8675309, Tommy Two Tone song, great little pop song. It came out, I guess it came out, I heard it the first time just in the days, a week or the days before I was about to graduate high school in 1982. Love the song. I remember where I heard it. I was in a barbecue restaurant eating barbecue sandwiches, and a buddy of mine was playing video games, and that was on the radio. Love the song. Anytime I hear that song now, I'm instantly in 1982, just 5 days or whatever away from graduating high school, and that you know time of possibility and growing up and finally finishing school and college ahead and dreams ahead and all that. So 82 was a great year. 84 was another great year. Just young and full of hopes and dreams and magical, wonderful. One of those years that I guess most all of us have when we're in that 18, 19, 20 year old part of our lives. So just a great year. Bittersweet memories. A lot of these albums I love. I love all of these albums, but because of the girl that I was dating and very serious about, and that didn't work out. That was the following year when we broke up there. But it's almost painful to listen to some of these songs, and for a long time I couldn't. But it's also good memories of good times and better times. So just get through some of these albums here. There were also this 84 was not as strong a year for releases as had been the previous early 80 years, and just 79 and 78. There were some really good albums, high quality albums still, but there were just less of them. And then 85 there were even less, and then as 86 and 87 it just kind of peters out, and music just sort of went pear-shaped in my opinion and was never as good again. MTV, which had started in '81, didn't really get it in my neighborhood till early '83, but some friends of mine got it in '82 because cable kind of came in neighborhood by neighborhood in Fort Worth. We remember when that was really fun and really good. I remember by the end of the '80s it was, this isn't as good as it used to be, and then by the '90s it pretty much tanked and was worthless and has been since. I mean, I haven't watched it in years, but the last time I saw it, it was still pretty awful. But some other really good, and I don't have these to show, Joan Jett, Glorious Results of a Misspent Youth, great album. Heartbeat City by the Cars, not my favorite Cars album, not their best album, but a really good album. I loved it. I got to see them in concert, Becky and I and some friends, that year in 1984 in Dallas. Probably their biggest selling album, I guess, because of MTV and the videos and the songs being all over the place. I don't know, maybe some of their, I'm betting that's probably their biggest selling album. Shake It Up probably be my favorite Cars album out of the bunch, but Heartbeat City was a good one. Great memories of those songs on the radio, on MTV, and Duran Duran didn't release an album in '84, but they released an album, Seven and the Ragged Tiger, right at the end, about November of '83. So a couple of singles from that were released in '84. New Moon on Monday was released early '84 as a single. These are two of my favorite Duran Duran songs. And then The Reflex was released later in the year in '84 and hit #1 both in America and England. And like I said, those are my two favorite Duran Duran songs. Not a huge Duran Duran fan. They were kind of more for the little girls and stuff, but they did have some good songs. And so those two from 1984, and this was they're still going strong into '85 and '86, but they were sort of on the decline of their popularity, was starting to, after this, go down. Like a Virgin, Madonna. I was never a Madonna fan. I don't dislike her per se, just never really got the attraction. She's kind of scungy, but her music to me was alright. It kind of a little bland. I could see why people liked it, but it just didn't do much for me. I was much more into like Pretenders and Go-Go's, Blondie, Pat Benatar, the Bangles, and stuff like that. But wasn't a huge Madonna fan, but you couldn't, like a Virgin, Borderline, and stuff like that, at '83 and into '84, those songs were anywhere and everywhere. You couldn't escape them. So on the rare occasions when I'll hear, and her later stuff I haven't any real interest in past that, but when I hear like a Virgin or Borderline on the radio, it just instantly I'm back in 1984. I remember being at Hewlin Mall with Becky. She was looking for earrings in Sanger Harris, and that was playing over the sound system, and I think we were in the store long enough that it played a couple of times, or maybe it played both those times, but those songs were all over the place, and of course she was all over MTV. So yeah, otherwise albums, U2, I kind of liked them when War came out for about 5 minutes. Then I decided that Bono, whatever, is a goofball, and lost interest in them pretty quick. The Unforgettable Fire was okay, but I didn't buy that one and didn't have much interest in it. So the amount of good albums is starting to go down in '84, but the quality of the ones that are good is still really high. So let's see here. I'm going to start off with one that I really love, but probably my least favorite of the bunch of '84. And I didn't actually heard about this in Spin magazine, which was at the time a new magazine. I think it started in '84, and might have been '83, but I think Spin started in '84. And I read a review about this band, and I didn't actually buy this album until '85. But so Husker Du Zen Arcade double album, which was supposed to be a no-no for a punk rock band to release a double album, because that smacked of the bloated rock and roll dinosaurs and hierarchy that punk rock was supposed to be replacing. But Husker Du released a double album, Zen Arcade, And the Minutemen released a double album, Double Nickels on the Dime, which I have and I forgot to pull out. But the Minutemen album really good. This one's really good. This is the better of the two. I haven't listened to this album in years. It's I should give it a listen sometimes. I still like it, but this is one of those type of albums that works better when you're 19, 20, 17, or whatever than when you're 58. This is punk rock and thrash and some psychedelia and fuzz rock and folk rock and just a whole bunch of stuff. And brilliant double album. Didn't do anything chart wise. Didn't get very much, if any, play on MTV. But it was one of those underground, albums that was big. And funny thing is, I like this album, love this album front to back, pretty much. There's not really any weak tracks on it. But other Husker Du albums, I've got some of the others, and I'm not really a big fan of the others. This is their best, in my opinion. This is the one I like best. Their other albums have some, like one or two, or a couple of 2 or 3 songs on them that I love, and the rest of it's just sort of okay filler to me. So this is their peak, and they carried on till 88, 89 or so and broke up. And then the individual guys, Bob Mould and the other guys, went on to do solo albums and stuff, which I was, what I've heard of those was they were okay. But yeah, so Husker Du, there's an underground album worth checking out. Good stuff. Like I said, this hits harder when you're younger than when you're older, I think, or at least it does for me. But moving on to, and it's probably maybe even better artistically than some of these albums that I'm going to show, but I just like these other albums better. So there was a show, George Gamark had a radio show on a local channel, KZEW The Zoo, and I think he might have done that show from wherever and might have played on radio stations across the country. But it was a great show because he would play punk rock and new wave and underground stuff. It came on Sunday nights for a couple of hours, so I always tuned into that because you would hear a lot of bands that didn't get regular radio airplay otherwise. Regular radio would still be playing Triumph and Rush and I don't know, Betty Davis Eyes and stuff like that. In addition, the regular radio back in those days still did play good music, which is funny to even think about because when you listen to regular radio stations now, it's either just top 40 garbage or rap, or it's oldie stations or the classic rock stations that just play the same 40, 50 songs over and over and over and over. So it's pretty useless, but it's sad and bittersweet and funny to remember that back then there was good stuff on the radio, but there were a lot of these new wave and punk and underground bands that didn't get much or any play on regular radio stations, at least not in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So there was also in the summer of '82, and '82 was another great, wonderful year. That's actually when I met the girl that I was talking about there that I fell in love with. Summer of '82, there was a radio station called KEGL, the Eagle. We used to call it the Kegel. It'd been around for years. Really crap radio station. Back in the 70s and early 80s, that was the sort of station that played like John Denver and Muskrat Love and Torn Between the Two Lovers and just sort of that wet noodle, namby-pamby stuff like that. Summer of '82, the station went to all punk rock and new wave, and it didn't last, unfortunately. It was that way for 3 or 4 months, but that was, and really before had MTV in Fort Worth and all, so that was sort of the first time to hear things like Sex Pistols, Elvis Costello, The Jam. That's where I discovered the Jams. My favorite bands are Beatles, Kinks, and Jam, and XTC and Wire and Joy Division and just stuff like that. So we used to listen to George Gamark, and then there was a college radio station, TCU, KTCU had some new wave and punk rock shows. The reason I bring that up is because the first band I'm going to talk about, they Bangles here, and they had on Record Store Day a few years ago an album that they put out, and I didn't get it, unfortunately. One of these days I need to, but had a lot of early, because before they did this album they did a single on their own little independent record label, and they put this out, which this isn't an original, this is an EP. This came out, they re-released this after their success, so like in 85 or 86 or so. You could get these everywhere. So the single and this came out before their debut album, and actually on this and the single they've got another bass player, Annette Zelenkas, who was replaced by Michael Steele later on. But they also, the Bangles did early on, besides the single and the EP, they did some random tracks that showed up on different compilation albums or ads and so forth. The Bangles, and I didn't realize this till just the other day when I was looking stuff up on them, did the theme song to the George Gamark show, which was called The Rock and Roll Alternative, and it's on that Record Store Day album. It's not a very good song. It's about 2 minutes of them going the rock and roll alternative, rock and roll alternative, rock and roll, and it's just that. I don't think it was meant to be a song proper, because in the introduction of the show, and I can remember that now thinking back, that show, unfortunately the Gamark show is long gone, just like 1984 is, but they only used like a few seconds of that for the introduction to the show. So I guess when they recorded the thing, they did that for 2 minutes so that they could pick whatever part of the song they wanted to use for the intro. But so that's why I talk about the Gamark show. This album, I don't even remember how I heard about it. I don't remember, because it didn't chart, or if it did, it was in like the lower 100s. Didn't get any radio play. Didn't they might have shown Hero Takes a Fall video on MTV. Maybe that's where I saw it. Maybe I heard him on the George Gamark show, because that might have made sense with them having the theme song, written the theme song for it. It would make sense that he would play songs from their debut album when it came out. But I'm not sure. I really don't remember where I heard of them. And I know other people heard of them. They weren't a big band at this point. They were the people that were into music and stuff, and I was definitely one of those. Kind of knew about them, but they were not. Damn it, the thing froze again.